equals mc squared. Paul referred to my roots. I was in engineering school before I was in ministerial school. In fact, all of my junior high and high school, I was planning on being an engineer. So when in the middle of engineering school, I decided I was going to become a minister, I was horrified. My dad had done that. That was the one thing I wasn't going to do. And yet it was my life. But I've never forgot my scientific bent. So every once in a while, I've got to dip back into, I see such parallels between the discoveries in science and spiritual awakening. Let's try equals mc squared. It's been around, 100 years now? More? Einstein. And we just accept it. It's the way it is. Scientifically, basically that equation means that energy is transmutable into matter and matter is transmutable into energy. Okay? What an interesting phenomenon. Now, is it getting too cold in here? No, we're okay. Okay. When we see icicles, you can make adjustments. In fact, you can move just move the blower from on to auto, so it just quits moving air, and see what happens. Equals mc squared. Spiritually, what I'm going to suggest is the fact that physical matter and energy are interchangeable, or at least transmutable, let's put it that way, okay, is really symptomatic of the same experience that we have in physical life. We live a physical life, but there is an energy experience that's going on with every physical experience that we go through. And if we are only aware in our physical body, all we see is the physical experience. But as we begin to awaken spiritually, we begin to sense in our hearts, because that's the organ. The heart is where you commune with the higher energies. We begin to sense in our heart all that the patterns that are going on through these physical experiences. So, when someone says, he has nice energy, you've got nice energy, they are not making a physical statement. They're making an energy statement. They're talking about something eyes and ears don't get, but heart does. A sense, they're talking about the basic essence they get off a person. When you look at a situation and you say, it doesn't feel right. Physically, your logic may tell you it should be right. Everything's in order. But when you look at it, something doesn't feel right. That's a perception of energy on an energy level. So what I'm suggesting today is that we can experience everything on a physical level, or we can experience it on an energy level, as an energy pattern, you might say. Or we could do both at the same time. The ultimate of spiritual awakening is not to leave the earth, but to realize that spirit pervades the earth. It's in everything. And to become aware of that. Not only can we experience it that way, but we can meet life that way. In other words, we can also do everything we do on a physical level. Or we can do it on an energy level, or we can do it physically with an energy component or prayer component to it at the same time. Now, I think I lost one out of first service, so I hope I don't lose anybody out of this one. I'm going to go truly weird on you today. I'm going to try to show you just a little bit of what I call glibly my world, okay? Because I live in a world of energy. To me, there is so much more than physical eyes see. I spent 7 years working on my heart, and I had no idea what it would open me up to. It's through your heart that in the end you'll perceive everything. And as you begin to live more and more in your heart, you feel things that physical eyes and physical ears cannot see or hear. And in that sense, you will have eyes to see and ears to hear, that which is beyond the physical. But it lies in your heart. Okay? So, what I'm going to do today is an overview of experiencing life on an energy level. I'm going to deal with stuff that we could spend a week on in one sentence. So it's an overview. Someone went out and said, I have a few questions. This talk is meant to create more questions than it's meant to answer. Okay? But let's stretch you out. Most of you are already there, at least to some extent. Okay? But this world is much more than physical eyes and physical ears experience. There is this rich level that we can connect with in the higher realms. Jesus came into the earth to awaken us all to how to negotiate the kingdom of the heavens, the higher realms. And isn't the higher realms are not here after you die? They're here right now. If you're stuck in the physical, you won't see them. But it doesn't mean it's not there. And as we awaken spiritually, we start to realize that there are levels to life that we've just paid no attention to before. That there's a whole lot more going on here. Happening on the higher levels. Happening on the spiritual levels of life. So, to try to explain to you a world that is seen through eyes that are looking for the energy patterns, the energy signatures of everything, as opposed to the actual physical experience, I'm just going to use a number of scriptures. Because Jesus lived his ministry on that level, without any doubt. He was always doing things on the higher level. We as disciples are supposed to follow in his footsteps. So maybe we ought to start paying attention and trying to wake up on these higher levels. In Luke 8:43 through 45. Now a woman who had had a hemorrhage for 12 years came near Jesus from behind and touched the edge of his cloak. And immediately her hemorrhage stopped. Here we have healing. But that's probably not the strangest part of this particular story. And Jesus said, "Who touched me?" Simon Peter and those who were with him said to him, "Teacher, the crowds are pressing on you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he said to them, "Someone has touched me, for I know that power has gone out of me." Touch can happen on several different levels. There is physical touch. People who are not aware of anything other than that's it. And hundreds of people were physically touching him. But all of a sudden Jesus said, "Who touched me?" Because someone had an energy exchange with him. He felt it happen. He felt something going down. There was a connection made. There was energy going back and forth. Not just two hands touching, but two hands touching and an energy experience happening through it. Didn't even touch his hand. He touched the hem of his robe. She did. You know what it brought back to me is a couple of weeks ago when I was talking about miracles. One of them, I said, 3 guys, we all met in this other man's room, and by accident. We were all there together. We held hands. We prayed with him. I said, as I walked out of there, I had the strangest feeling something happened. There was a feeling that something happened. There was an energy flow. There was something. It's kind of like that, who touched me? Something happened. You can feel energy when it flows. And you can touch someone with your hand, or you can touch them with your hand and your spirit. Just radiating it out through. In Matthew 12, 22, 24, and 25, they brought to Jesus a lunatic who was also dumb and blind. Now, I thought about this for a second. If back in that era I was dumb and blind, I think I'd be a little bit of a lunatic myself. Okay? So we're going to give him credit here. And Jesus healed him. But when the Pharisees heard of it, they said, this man does not cast out demons except by Beelzebub, the prince of demons. But Jesus knew their thoughts. Okay, now we aren't talking about healing as much as we're talking about feeling the energy of intent. Something we all probably do a little bit. Jesus in this moment, he doesn't hear what the Pharisees are saying. He doesn't know what's transpired. But then in the next few lines, he addresses that whole thought. You don't heal with the devil. That isn't how it works. He addresses that whole concept. Why? Because he knew their intent. You don't know intent with your mind or your ears. You know it with your heart. The person may be saying one thing, and you realize they have no intention of doing that. There may be no physical sign, but you have this knowing deep down inside. That's perceiving intent. You're perceiving the energy, not the outer action. Now Jesus at one point said, the things that I do ye shall do, and greater things than this shall you do in my name. As you enter into my consciousness, greater things. Greater things. Now, all he's really saying is, you're going to do everything I did, but don't limit it to the things I did. The realm of spirit is so vast, you're going to do other things besides that. All kinds of things are going to come up where you're going to be able to allow spirit to move through your life and do amazing things. So, one of them is perceiving intent. It's a feeling. All feelings are in the heart. And as you open your heart, and Jesus presented the path of the heart, as you open the heart, you can feel intent. He was very, very good at it. Now I'm going to go another direction entirely, and I'm going to digress into dream interpretation, okay? We're going to use Joseph. It got him to be the head of Egypt, so it must have been a good dream interpretation, huh? Anyway, will we all agree that the dream world doesn't function exactly like by the same rules that we have in the outer world? We wake up from some dreams and things have gone down with us that are so strange that we go, oh, I'm not even comfortable with that. My God, why, ooh. And it wasn't what happened, it was how you felt while it was happening that is probably most important. It gives you insight into what it actually meant. We all want to grab our dream book and get out. Okay, well, this means this, and this means that, and that means the other. And yeah, that'll get you started, but it won't take you there. What was most important about dream interpretation is divining the basic energy pattern within the dream, okay? In other words, not this specifically did that, but that is in general this type of energy moving into that type of energy. And once you have done it that direction, once you've got it into generality, then you take it back out into outer life and see where would this type of an energy pattern fit in my life. Now that's exactly what Joseph did. Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream I was standing on the bank of a river, and behold, there came up out of the river 7 fat and beautiful cows. And 7 other cows came up after them, poor and ill-favored and lean. And the lean and ill-favored cows ate up the first 7 fat cows. And when they had eaten them up, it could not be known that they had eaten them, for they were still ill-favored as in the beginning. And then I awoke. I'm going to stop here for a moment and say, okay, this is dream world. In the real world, cows don't eat other cows. And if that were to happen, that cow gets stronger and bigger, and that didn't happen. Okay? So obviously this is dream world. But what we're looking at is we are seeing this rich and beautiful that comes out first, followed by scrawny and ugly, which in the end eats up the rich and beautiful. And there is an energy to that. There is an energy of lack eventually eating up abundance, which is what Joseph in the end tuned in on. It says, and continuing, it says, again I saw in my dream 7 ears of grain growing on one stalk, full and good, and 7 other ears, thin and blasted by the east wind, sprang up after them, and the thin ears devoured the 7 good ears. Okay. Once again, dream world. You ever seen corn eat corn? But it's the same energy pattern, isn't it? That represents lack and less than comes along after and devours or consumes that which represents abundance. Now, here's Joseph taking these energy patterns and applying them. Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. Obviously, it's the same pattern, whether it's corn or it's cattle. Behold, there are coming 7 years of great plenty, and there will arise after them 7 years of famine. And the famine shall consume the land. The dream was repeated to Pharaoh twice. This is because the thing, is already prepared by God, and God will hasten to bring it to pass. Let Pharaoh do this: appoint officers over the land of Egypt to take the 5th part of produce during the 7 plenteous years, and let the grain be kept for the land against the 7 years of famine, so that the land may not perish through the famine. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, for as much as God has shown you all this, you shall be over my household. Okay. First thing he says, repetition. That means what? Emphasis or even immediacy. This is taken off. This is happening now. You need to act on this now. When you have a dream that's repeated over and over, you figure you probably got a message, right? Now, let me back off and say, when you have a life experience that is repeated over and over, you probably got a lesson growing there too. You can apply the same sense of energy patterns to your outer life that you apply to your dream life. But okay, here we go. You translate it, and basically we have this sense of lack that eventually comes down the road and gets the sense of prosperity. And if you take that pattern and you look at the outer life, and you're talking to the Pharaoh of Egypt, the guy who's in charge of how everything goes in this country, you look and you say, well, you got 7 fat cows coming, okay? You've got this sense of prosperity, and God is making it known to you so you can prepare for the lean years to come. Because you've taken the same energy pattern that is out of this weird thing with cattle eating cattle, and you have put it out into an outer life, that general energy pattern into the outer life. And you go, this is where it applies. Now, there's so many different ways that life expresses this energy. I see it very much like The Matrix. Where in the first movie, that was the good one, where they're in it, they're experiencing an actual physical experience. Supposedly, they're doing it all in their heads, but it appears very real. And yet, at the same time, you can also look on a computer screen and see the energy pattern that's behind that experience. Well, that's what's going on here. We have physical experiences, but there are a whole bunch of energies behind the scenes. And as we tune in and begin to become aware of them, you got a much better shot at succeeding in life. Any way you cut it. So here we go, Matthew 17, 1 through 3. Jesus took Peter, James, and John up to a high mountain, and Jesus was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes turned white like light. And there appeared to them Moses and Elijah, and they were talking with him. When I read that, I remember that, periodically someone comes up to me after service and says, I saw your aura. You must have been really something today. And I normally just say thank you. But I'm going to tell you what goes on in my head. I always have an aura. And so do you. That's a statement on you, not me. You had a moment in which you perceived my spiritual radiance. And that's what Peter, James, and John had. They went up on the mountain. They moved into prayer. And all of a sudden, they saw Jesus in his full spiritual glory as the energy being, as the spiritual being that he was. This radiant being of light. It wasn't that Jesus suddenly was glowing brighter than before. It's that they saw it. They were able to perceive him in his spiritual essence for just a few moments. They saw him speaking with Moses and Elijah. As far as I'm concerned, well, maybe he was. And maybe he wasn't. You see, Moses and Elijah would have been representative of the ancient wisdom of divine mind, of the wisdom of the higher realms. Maybe he was communing with the wisdom of the higher realms, and they saw it as Moses and Elijah, who, by the way, there were no pictures of. Or maybe it was Moses and Elijah. I don't care. But they saw a communing with higher wisdom along with this radiant light. For a moment, They saw Jesus in his full-fledged glory, not just with physical eyes. In 1 Thessalonians 5:17, Paul writes, "Pray without ceasing." That ought to worry you if you think of prayer as something that is spoken aloud or even inside your head. Because every once in a while we have to do things other than speak words. And Jesus said the same thing in the parable of the importunate widow. You know, the widow that bugged the judge until she got what she wanted. Originally it says, and he told this parable to say that you should pray constantly and not give up. Constantly. What I really see that's happening here is you should work in the higher realms constantly with everything you do. Don't just do it physically. Do it in the higher realms. At the same time you are doing your physical activity. Work the two together. Pray constantly. Work in that kingdom on a continuing basis. So, how do we work with spiritual energies while living a physical life? Well, I'm going to break it down into two categories. First is heart perception. That is where we begin to listen and feel on that heart level, that higher level, that spiritual level, that invisible level, if you will. And then I'm going to talk about energy activities. How you actually, when you're doing something, can do something spiritually at the same time you're doing something physically. Okay? They work together. When you begin to see that this world is more than a physical world, that there is energy beneath and above and around everything, that the glory of God shines through everything that is, if you got the eyes to see it. When you start to realize that, you start working with the world on several different levels at the same time. So here we go, heart perception. Takes place in the heart. It's where you feel. You have eyes, ears, physical senses that experience physical things, but you have a heart that feels something that is beyond what your physical senses tell you. That's why Jesus pioneered the path of the heart. That's why that's what he taught is called the path of the heart. So, everyone you meet looks a certain way, but they also have a certain texture to their being. You can either look at someone and size them up. I know my first girlfriend in Miami when I was 23 years old, just been ordained. She was great at sizing people up. She could tell you about you from your shoes, your clothes, how you wore your hair. She knew everything there was. I was amazed at what she could do with that. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is looking into someone's eyes. If you see whether they're either blue or brown, you're still looking with physical eyes. But if you look beyond that and can feel beyond that, you feel the essence of who they are. And everyone in the world has a unique essence. They all feel just slightly differently than anyone else when you feel what they're like. And we need to spend our lives not just meeting people on a physical level, but also reaching out and touching who are they inside. Not what clothes are they wearing outside. Who are they? And you can feel that. You can feel it reflected as you place your heart on them. Now, I've often said when teaching heart energy that you practice looking into people's eyes and knowing who they are, just looking at them and knowing who they are. It's just a point of focus. And then you feel the texture of their being. And you say, okay, can you describe to me what you have gotten out of that, this information that you've gotten? And so many times you cannot put it into words, you can't put it into logic. It defies a physical language. You say, then it's useless. And I say, oh, absolutely not. I can say that because of what I know that I cannot put into words about this being, because of the texture of their being, I can tell you how they will react in a certain situation. And that, by the way, is useful. But I can't tell you why I can tell you that, because that doesn't fit into words. Okay? The realm of the heart is so vast. People have said, you worked on your heart for 7 years? Why'd you stay at it that long? Because the further I went, the more I realized what I hadn't explored yet. It's huge. Anyone who's been very far into the heart would never come back and say, I've already opened my heart, I'm done with that. That's only a beginner. Anyone who'd gone in very far would be awestruck with how huge the realm is. And it's your heart, this realm, that you can experience the higher spiritual energies. You can sense intent. And when you are dealing with people, you need to listen to them. You need to put your mind in gear. I am never telling you to disengage your mind. Keep your mind in gear, figure it out, get everything set where you want, but before you make your final move, open up your heart. Sense intent. Sense what's going on here. And when you do something, place intent in it. When you speak something, intend that it heal. Intend that it be taken lovingly, and you might get away with it. If not, you're going to take offense. An adoration of beauty. This is where you're going to do it all day long. You're going to look at something like a tree and you're going to say, yep, that has a trunk, branches, and leaves. I recognize that. That's called a tree. And then you're going to stop for a moment and you're going to feel its essence. You're going to feel treeness. First service laughed at that one. And you're going to adore it. This is the beauty of God shining through. The glory of God shining through everything. If you're willing to see beyond the physical perception to the radiance of the energy that's shining through it. That's the glory of God forever shining through life. Adoration. Cherishing the essence of everything that you encounter. Now, quickly, how do we pour energy into our activities as we do physical things? Number one, with touch. You're going to not just touch, but give a piece of yourself. Give some energy. Give support. Give love. Let it all flow through that momentary touch. Radiate a blessing with your hands, like we did today, right? Gee, is it dependent on my hands being raised? Under no conditions. But we're coordinating a outer physical activity with an inner spiritual radiance that we are opening ourselves up to feel moving through us. So go ahead and give a blessing. You're a child of God. God can move through you to bless everyone and everything around you. Breathe. Breath is not just air moving in and out of lungs. There is a spiritual energy to breath. Whether you know it or not, when the energy is cold in the room, I'll sit down there in that front row and I'll breathe energy into the room. once had a friend was coming, a Sufi teacher was going to come and speak for me. I was in Miami, actually, at the church I was getting started down there. And Alima, I said, okay, just don't go wild on the Islamic wazifas and everything. That might be a little much for our people. Try to clean it up a little bit for them. And she said, oh, if I sense resistance, I'll breathe. I thought you might need to breathe the entire time you're there. But what she meant was you can breathe peace into a room. Can you do it without using the breath? Oh, of course. But you can use the breath as a container. The physical world can become a container for the spiritual energies that flow through us. So learn to breathe joy, love, peace into the rooms where you reside. And use imaging along with whatever you're doing. If you're trying to succeed, image yourself successful just before you begin it. Take a moment to see it going well. If you've got an encounter coming up, image God moving through that encounter and then go do it. It's another container. Image surrounding something in light. We are all children of light, right? It says so. A number of places in the Bible. You are the children of light. When you surround something in light, you're knowing it's protected, or they are protected. You're knowing they're healed, they're loved. What are you really doing? You're seeing God is there. That's what that image of light is about. You're saying, God is there, and all is well. And if you got something going on, something that's important, well, go ahead and image angels or spiritual forces, whatever it is, however you want to image it. Image the higher realms assisting you, moving through it. Some people got this scientific bent. They want to see it as a vortex of spiritual energy. Others like pretty girls with wings. I'm fond of pretty girls with wings. Either way. Yeah, you can have your males with wings too. I don't care what your image is. It's just a container. The image is not what counts. It's the knowing that Spirit is moving. That's where the power is. Number 5 is use spiritual law. For instance, the law of consciousness. Hold steady and peaceful when faced with turbulence. That's hard, but if you can do it, you can change the character of how things flow. Basically, this one is described as hold the high ground in a difficult encounter. Hold the high ground. Law of consciousness goes like this. Two people cannot stay in one another's presence while in two different states of consciousness or two different emotional states. If you hold peace, the other must eventually join you or take their leave. Much of the time they go storming out because they can't take being upset in the presence of someone who's peaceful. But you can often bring them to you. Now, this is just the law of life. You're going to try to draw them to you if you remain peaceful. But never kid yourself. They're going to try everything they can to draw you to them and get you upset. It's after that. If they fail and you hold on to your peace, they'll have to choose. Do I join him or do I leave? It's a spiritual law, and you can use it in your outer physical experiences. Number 6, look down the different roads of your choices with your heart and not just your head. Use your head. Figure it all out. Look down the road the whole way. But then turn around and say, there's always a multiple number of paths in front of you. In your mind, walk down that path, and in your heart, feel what that feels like. In your mind, walk down the next path. In your heart, feel what that feels like. And add that piece of information into your final decision. Number 7 and 8 are just normal spiritual teaching. Ask for help from higher sources with everything you do. You're allowed to ask for help. You should. State of my memory these days, I'm also saying, God, I can use some help here. My hard drive's full, so consequently, things disappear when I put in new energy. As soon as I ask, it's amazing. It is almost miraculous. I walk right to it. It's the way it works. Ask for help. Know that Spirit is helping you in whatever you're doing. And continually turn your objectives over to God. There is nothing more powerful than in the end say, I've done all I can do. God, it's in your hands. When you really turn it over, that's amazingly powerful. And in the end, there is no physical counterpart to that. That is a spiritual activity. So, the things that I do, you shall do. As we awaken spiritually, as we truly try to follow in Jesus' footsteps, the kingdom of the heavens is going to open up, and we're going to start realizing there's a lot more going on in this world than we have been seeing. You do the things that I did and greater things. That is, there's a lot that can happen in your life when you open up to Spirit. Don't limit it to what's already happened. There is so much more. If you want to live life richly, you'll start realizing there's a whole lot more. You'll start opening your heart, feeling the essence of everything and everyone you meet and every choice you make. And life will become so much richer because you're just beginning to sense the glory of God shining through everything. And I mean everything. Let's close our eyes. Father, help us to awaken. Give us eyes to see and ears to hear. That we, in the end, may be thy messengers of light and love. And we may see the amazing richness of these lives we live. Thank you, God. Amen. The ushers who come forward will prepare for our offering.